Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others. Often they are founded in fact.
Broadcasting live from our Sanctum Sanctorum in bountiful Bakersfield, California. This is the Sixth Sense Society. I'm your host, Krista, here with our producer, Michael. And today we're excited to have an in-person guest. We have Chauncy Felisz, and she is a professional visual development artist from the UK, currently residing here in Bakersfield. And she writes really cool fantasy novels and is a brilliant artist in general. And she knows a lot about magic and has created a magical world in her novel, so we wanted to sort of talk to her about that. But before we get started, Michael has a few announcements.
Everybody, welcome back to our show. And next week we have our good friend Dan Moore coming back for a visit, and he will be talking about the esoteric hangman and the trump of the tarot. So that's exciting. And then we're finishing the month with Renee Starr. Then we'll be on break through April and back in May. You can get all the information on the upcoming shows on our website, sixthsensesociety.com, SXTH, all spelled out. While you're there, please buy us a coffee on Ko-Fi. Helps us cover some of our production costs. But if you can't afford that, we love you anyway. So please tune in. And the most important thing, click like and subscribe so you can help us grow our audience, and that we truly appreciate. And don't forget our new book, Tarot Alchemy, a Kabbalah-inspired approach to reading the cards, is now available on Amazon. Please search under books so you'll never find it. And thank you to those of you who've purchased it. And we are going to have a book launch here in Bakersfield in April coming up at the Enchanted Cottage. We're still confirming a date, the first half of April. So we'll let you guys know. It'll be on the website when we do that as well. So not going to take up any more time because we're so excited to have Chauncy here. So I'm going to kick it back to both of you guys. So take it away, Krista.
Great. Thank you, Michael, and welcome, Chauncy.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for having me.
I did want to mention the title of your books, and to show I have the first one here.
Brilliant.
And it's called Everdoor, Sin and Sacrifice Edition. And the second one is Everdoor Samsara.
Correct.
So I'm very excited to read it. I'm going to get you to sign it later.
Absolutely. Cool. I'm excited to sign it.
Yes.
It's always cool when someone has a book. I'm like, oh, yes, I can sign it.
It is fun that way, though. I had sort of a thing where I had to practice my signature because it's gotten so sloppy over the years.
Well, it's good to have like your artist signature that's separate from like the signature you use to pay your bills and stuff.
You are right. That is so true.
I have an artist signature and I have my official signature.
Yeah.
You don't want the two to be the same.
And do you have like a favorite pen that you like to sign
I do
with?
actually. I do. I think well, we'll see. I might have my pen with me in my bag.
Oh,
So
if not, we can wait. It's fine. I want you to be comfortable too. So,
make sure.
But
it's all set.
so anyway, the first thing I wanted to sort of mention is I think that just as an aside to everyone is I think you're our fourth studio guest in Bakersfield.
Nice.
So we're very excited about that because we love in studio guests. And I was wondering, like, how long have you actually lived here in Bakersfield? I know you were originally from the UK.
Yeah, I've been in Bakersfield for about 8 years. But just to touch on it, I did have the bad marriage. And for 6 of those years, I was kind of just indoors most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I really didn't get to explore Bakersfield until like a few years ago.
Mm.
So it's kind of new to me. So like, yeah, I've been here for like 8 years, but really I've only gotten to know Bakersfield in the past like 2 years. So yeah.
That's really interesting. And I was thinking about place in general, and we were talking earlier before the show, and how one of the things that you're very interested in are old civilizations and ancient civilizations.
Yeah. I love all that stuff.
And of course, they're associated with places. And the fact that you created a fantasy world.
Yeah.
So do you think that your journey living in different places or interest in places has had an influence on what you decided to write about?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, because kind of to give everyone a little like rundown, I am originally from the UK. I know I sound American, but I was born and raised in London. I lived there until I was 11. My mother was American, so after they had divorced, she took me to America. So it was born and raised London, lived in California and Los Angeles my teen years, moved out when I was 18, moved up to Oregon, was there for a few years, went back to the UK, traveled Europe for half a year, ended up in Scotland for 2 years, and then came back to America. And then, I did college down in Orange County, and then eventually I ended up in Bakersfield. So I've just kind of done like this big like circle around like the Western world. But yeah,
living in Scotland, that seems to be a lot of people's sort of dream that at least are interested in sort of
I loved
the
it.
Celtic traditions or the Scottish traditions. And
yeah, no, so I was in Edinburgh, Scotland, and I really loved it there. It definitely had a huge influence on this book particularly, because there's a thing that goes on in August. I think it's for most of August. It's either like 3 weeks or the whole month, but it's the Fringe Festival. And it's a big festival where there's like lots of like live art. The liquor license is extended for like a few hours, so like all the bars stay open later, and it's like just like this big party for like 3 weeks. And in my book, there's this thing called the Lunar Week, which is like this week long of like just darkness, and it's a huge party, and like that was definitely like a big influence from like being in Edinburgh, just like experiencing that, and like I wanted to infuse that into my story as well.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So, yeah.
Now, do you follow a particular tradition yourself? Are you eclectic, or how would you define yourself?
Probably a little eclectic, I guess. Because when you read about more like civilizations and you read about ancient worlds and different religions and all that sort of stuff, it's kind of hard to kind of pigeonhole yourself into one thing. You kind of start cherry picking things that kind of feel like, oh yeah, no, I vibe with that. So I like a lot of pagan stuff, but I've read into so many different things that I kind of just do a little bit of everything. I love magic and ritual just in general, because I think it's very fulfilling. It gives you something in your life that, those actions, like, when you light candles or when you do like a little tarot card spread. Edinburgh is where I got into tarot reading too, because I met a tarot reader who had been doing it for 10 years. And then that kind of got me into it as well. So,
that sounds really cool.
That was awesome.
Going to a tarot reader in Edinburgh.
Yeah, during the Fringe Festival.
Yeah,
so it was super cool.
That is. Well, Michael's from Nova Scotia, which has got that Scottish influence, and they still have places in Nova Scotia where they speak Gaelic, Scottish Gaelic.
Oh, that's super cool.
Yeah, and they have a huge musical tradition there that's pretty fantastic. People, the fiddlers and all of that.
Love all of that. Like the folk music has like so much passion in it.
Yeah.
And that's something I really loved in Edinburgh also. Like the live music was phenomenal. Like not just folk music, but like, modern type bands as well. And like there was always like live music playing somewhere, local bands playing somewhere, and it was so incredible. I really loved Edinburgh. It was such a great creative place to be, and I think that definitely gave me like a huge like influence, even though I didn't end up writing Everdoor until quite a few years later. I mean, I left Edinburgh, I was probably like 22, and so Everdoor came out only a few years ago. So like the seeds of creation were kind of planted, but it took a little while for it to all bloom.
And so what is the premise of Everdoor?
So, well, that's a good point. It is a fantasy adventure that I describe as kind of like a Tolkien-esque, timey-wimey Doctor Who kind of thing. Because
you're hitting all my favorites.
Yes. So it starts on an alternate version of Earth. And it's the idea of like, going from like the modern mundane world into the magical world. The main character is Gerald Allis. He's set up for a crime that he didn't commit. And just as all of this transpires, his path is crossed with Etcher Everdoor, who is this mystical thief who can hop around to different places in the universe using her potion shop. She can just teleport. And they enlist each other's help, and then they go on this big journey, and it's kind of like you're uncovering the deeper, darker truths of everything. And there's, the big bads and old gods and, reapers and death and, different realms and all that sort of stuff. So stuff that I love in fantasy.
And so I know that Tolkien was, of course, influenced by a lot of Norse mythology. Do you have any particular mythologies that have more influence to you that you are aware of? I suppose some of this is subconscious when you go to write.
I think it would be hard to point at one like specific that was like the strongest influence. I do love Norse mythology. And I mean, I don't know if people kind of gathered from like the second book's called Samsara. So there's a lot of like Eastern beliefs as well. At the very start of this book, it starts with these old gods named Aleph and Tav, which is Alpha and Omega, beginning and end. and they're playing a chess game. So there's a lot of like imagery, and like there's a lot of different like religions and mythology that's kind of infused in there. But Eastern and Norse and a little bit of Egyptian as well, with like the different death realms and stuff like that. But I couldn't point to one particularly.
Makes sense. And this came out like more in around the 2020, 2021.
Yeah, I think it was either 2021 or 2022. But that series is now done because it is only the 2 books. It's Sin and Sacrifice Edition and then Samsara, and it's concluded.
Yeah. So it sounds like, from what I read in your little bio, that you, however, were creating the universe for a long time before you actually sat down and started writing it, which I found really interesting.
Yeah.
I think that writers work differently. There are writers that work a lot in their head. Like they work constantly in their head. And I don't know that they get credit for that.
I suppose.
So, but it's interesting. The other thing that's kind of interesting about you is not everyone that writes fantasy practices what they write about.
It's kind of hard not to. I guess I'm too deep into it because
Right.
I like the world of Eclipse, which is the magical world that you go to in Everdoor. That's something that I created like when I was a kid, like as far back as I remember. And I would create the languages, and I would create the creatures, and I would draw like the different gods and stuff. And I have like a whole world map. And I kept building this world until it kind of started to run on its own, because I had laid so much of the foundation that like it really kind of became like its own living, breathing thing, to the point where, if I just drop a character in, I just have to watch them go, because like all the rules of the world are already there.
Right.
So yeah, I had this world that I had for such a long time, and then it took a while to kind of mature enough to be able to write a story that held together. Because I did try. Even back in high school, I was trying to write like stories of Eclipse, but I was too young. I didn't have enough of the worldly experience, and every time I would try to write it, it would just kind of fall apart. There was Jero. I had my main character Jero since high school, but Etcher didn't exist yet. And so the counterparts that he had, they just didn't quite fit. And then eventually when I made Etcher, everything kind of snapped into place. But I think I needed more of the world experience, traveling Europe and living in Edinburgh and, kind of growing up a little bit more.
I think there's something to that. Certainly there are famous books that people wrote when they're young, but there's definitely a lot of books that they stick around. Like, I mean, Tolkien is a great example because of how long it took him to write it and what he did.
He was quite...
his background alone. Also, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. Have you read Susanna Clarke's book? It's based on English magic.
No, I know of the name, but I haven't read.
It's fabulous. We saw it as a series first, and the premise is set during Napoleon. So it's got a little bit of a history in it. And it's this idea that there are these magicians. They don't think magic is real, and they all get together and they just talk about it. But Mr. Norrell, he knows it's real, and so then also Jonathan Strange. They are practicing magicians. But it's such but the thing, she did a lot of research on British magic and the fairy realm.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
It's really dark at times, and it took her 10 years to write that. It's a really long book. It's fabulous. It's like Tolkien in the sense that you get into this deep thing that has this incredible like drama because there's got war in it, but also she really did her homework, and it's things I never knew about fairy magic.
I'm gonna have to
I think you would really like it. It's one of the
sounds like
more modern
like.
ones I've really, and it took her, I think it did take her like 10 years to write it, but it's so big, you can see the complexities to keep it all in. And like you said, you were patient enough to wait to let the character...
sort of.
Well, no, you should give yourself credit that you didn't give up, but you knew it wasn't working.
Yeah, I mean, I have like the older versions, and there was definitely points where I had to be like, all right, I have to set this aside. This is not working. But always the intention was there to continue. Like I never stopped creating stuff for Eclipse. I have stacks of notebooks with just stuff, just plants or quirky tidbits. Because I also have the Traveler's Guide to Eclipse, a longish compendium of things, which is fully illustrated. And it's basically a world guide, and it shows you just everything about Eclipse. It's actually been very helpful for me because like I go back and I read through it. I'm like, wait, what was that thing that I said? Oh, there it is.
That is so interesting.
Yeah, but it's a companion piece to the Everdoor series. Like you don't have to read them together, but if you wanted to learn more about the world, it just gives you a little bit of everything, like from the food to the people to the countries to the gods to everything. But yeah, even though my first attempts at writing like a serious novel didn't work out in the early days, I was still determined to like I want something. I have to make something. Something's missing. I don't know what, but you know, I got there eventually.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it looks, and also you did the artwork right for
I
the
did
cover
indeed, yeah.
as well.
Because I am an illustrator. That was my profession. I have a bachelor in game art. So that originally I was trying to get into the game industry, and I did do a little bit of work as like an illustrator for like different video games and like entertainment media. But yeah, that's actually like my trade, which makes it a little easier to like design really nice covers. And I'm proud of the internal work too. I think it's a very nice book that's been put together. But yeah,
it's
from
beautiful.
cover to cover, that's all my work.
Yeah. No,
for both of them.
It's very nicely put together.
Thank you.
It looks really, really good. I am looking
was my
forward to
goal.
reading it, honestly. And the other thing I wanted to talk about it was interesting when you were talking about, or ask you about actually, is you were talking about creating this world and it has its own rules now. And do you know that word egregore in Magic? It's the idea of creating a thought form.
Yeah.
And we had a guest on. I didn't even know about that concept until like, I don't know, late in the game. And I was like, how did I miss that one? But it seems like, in a way, a person like you, where you spent so much time creating a world, that it really does have a form of existence.
It kind of, yeah, sometimes I feel more like the conduit, and that this place has actually become, and I'm just there just to write it on paper, as it were. You know, because when you build enough of the foundation, it kind of just starts to function on its own. I kind of feel like a little bit like a dungeon master in like D&D. I just kind of have to throw the characters in and just watch what they do.
Right.
Because, you know, the world's already established. Like, you know, I kind of know what I keep knocking this thing. I'm very gesticulate with my hands. But because I kind of know what's going to happen in the world, I know that, okay, well, if this character's here, then this is what's all around them, and this is what's going to happen because, you know, everything's already been created. So it has like, it's not rigid, but there's enough structure that it kind of just runs on its own.
Yeah.
So yeah, it does sort of like, sometimes I think it's like, this place is real in a sense, you know?
Right.
So
now, do you find it, since you also do ritual and magic, do you find that the experience is enhanced doing it in the regular world, or do you feel because you work in the fantasy world, is it more because it's fantasy and you can do more magical things, that it's more, I don't know, what's the word I'm trying to think of? It's exciting in the actual creative world, or is magic real magic in the sense of being grounded in the physical world? What is like the difference for you since you do both?
well, I mean, when you write like magic in the books, it can be like the super magical, you know, flames and sparks and summoning dragons and like, you know, movie stuff. And real world magic is very subtle. You know, it speaks in a much quieter voice. It's a very gentle kind of truth that you can kind of tap into, but it's so delicate that sometimes it can, you know, vanish just as quick. Like magic in books is very evident. You know, it's like you when you're reading about like, you know, yeah, a dragon came out of a portal. It's like, yeah, well, then I would believe in magic too if I could just summon a dragon. But like, you can't do that in this reality. There's still magic, but it's a very gentle kind of magic. And so one is very overt and one is very delicate. Not in the sense that it can be destroyed, but just to be able to grasp it, you have to approach it very differently. You know, I can't just like shoot fire.
That's a good point.
You know?
I like that. It's a little more ethereal here.
Yeah.
However, one of the things, going back to the concept of place and magic, one of the things we've noticed from moving, like when we moved from the East Coast to West Coast.
Oh, yeah.
We, and I'd lived the East Coast my whole life until we came to California. The magic was different here.
Oh, yeah.
Very different. And we just couldn't get it to work. And so that place and magic, I think it's a little bit underestimated for people. I mean, it used to not be when people did magic. They knew that place was important. But we noticed that, and even coming to Bakersfield, I have this whole new thing with magic. It's different from Venice because we're not by the ocean anymore.
Yeah, there's a very, place has a huge influence on like just what's around, how you feel. Like, sorry, like, yeah, when you're not by the ocean, that's very different too. That's a whole different feeling. And I believe it when you say there was a different like magic, how you were using it at the East Coast as opposed to like California, because people's collective belief also impact how that magic can manifest. If you're in a place where people just are like, they don't believe in any of that stuff and they're very like, narrow-minded, it affects the place too. It makes it harder to kind of tap into something, ethereal if everyone is like, nope. But when you're in places that like are very like in Oregon, I felt, the energy is just very different. I lived in Oregon for a few years. I was in Bend. And like, it kind of felt like being in Middle Earth because there's the trees, evergreens, and like sometimes there'd be deer outside the garden, and like it felt much more calm. I mean, everyone's having a good time too, but it felt like very different. And then going from Oregon and then visiting LA, it was like immediately the change. Like everything's just like go 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 in this energy. I was just like, ooh, I want to leave. I don't like it here.
Yeah.
But yeah, places hold like something, and it sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad.
Well, I think that, I know that people that respect the local deities and they talk about giving offerings to local deities, they're aware of that. And so one of the things I have found being in Bakersfield is, first of all, it's very agrarian.
Yeah.
And also it's very Christian.
Yeah.
And so the way I decided to appeal to the Christian side is through the image of the dove, since I feel connected to doves, and dove is a Christian symbol. And so somehow acknowledging it, like not trying to counter it, but just acknowledge it. I even had a very strange Christian dream that I had to go look up some words in it.
Yeah,
and
like,
they
what
were
is
really,
this?
it really was like this Christian thing that I'd never heard of. And I said, oh, there really is that filter, because there are a lot of Christian churches here. And that's just not to say there's not any paganism or anything like that, but I thought, well, maybe I can try and somehow immediately try to connect and honor the fact that I'm okay with that. I'm okay with what the traditions are here, and I want to respect it. But it's just so interesting how places like that.
Yeah, it has such a strong influence. I think that's an excellent point too, to respect what's there. Like, it doesn't matter if you don't believe or don't agree, but you can't deny that, look, this is the culture of this place. And the more respectful and understanding is different than accepting.
Exactly.
But the more understanding and respectful you are of what is there, the more harmoniously you can get along and still make place for what you believe.
Right.
And that's what I try and do. Like, I have my beliefs. I'm very spiritual. I love my little rituals, and I read up on occult stuff and different religions and old world things, and I like to implement that. But I still have to respect, like, this is the climate of this area.
Right.
That's how people are, and that's okay.
Now, do you have any favorite deities or?
I try not to attach to specific ones, but I really love Anubis because we had talked about this a little bit. But growing up in England, I loved going to the Natural History Museum, especially the ancient Egypt exhibit. And I thought Anubis was the coolest thing ever. Like, because I was creating my creatures, and then there's Anubis with this jackal head, and like, it's so unlike anything I'd ever seen. So I was like, oh wow, that's amazing. So I got very fascinated with that. But I don't like to attach to like a specific deity. I like looking at the Elegua and like Yamaya, like those are from like African deities. I like looking at some of Santeria, and like I like looking at all different pieces and like having little representations of that in my house. Because I have like masks for like Elegua, and I have Anubis sculptures, and I have other stuff like that. But I try not to be like, this is the one. Everyone's just got to get along. I've got stuff from Norse, like I have Tyr, and everyone's got to get along in my house. If they're from different religions, whatever, I don't care where the deities are from. We're all gonna be chill here.
Deities not getting along. That sounds very Greek and Roman.
Yeah. No, but like I have like a mass for like Kali, like goddess of death, and I love all of these different religions and different cultures, because there's things from them that I find are very valuable. So I like to at least pay my respects to them, but I try not to get too worshipy with them.
Right.
I try and be cool. It's like, all right, I'm cool with you guys. You're cool with me. We can be homies, but I'm not going to be a worshiper.
What do they call? You're like a freelancer or
a
nomad, or I'm trying to think of what they call it in hockey. I forget. So as I lost my thought. I was going to say something about the deities there, not getting into fights with each other.
Yeah, my house, my rules. Like, everyone's welcome, but no fighting.
So, I was gonna talk about language because you made up some language
made quite a few different languages. I have scripture and spoken.
What is magic and language is really interesting, and using magical words of any kind.
Yeah, there's power in it. I think even if you were to look at it from like the psychological, like the things that you actually physically vocalize have an impact on your mentality. So it's kind of the same with magic too. Like the things that you voice, you do give power to. And I don't know if this is my love for Tolkien, but like I just love language, and I find it so fascinating. And so I have languages of power in my world too, and it feels very mystical when they're saying things in like the other languages, and there's something there. Like even when I've studied occult stuff, like even though the words might be made up, there's something in how they sound, that there's something powerful in it, and just like vocalizing them kind of gives you something back too.
It's so true. I love, like, I know I'm not very good with the Sanskrit and the Tibetan, but I do love trying to say it. And one of the things I was really into Tibetan Buddhism in my 20s. I was very dedicated, and I don't realize how fortunate I was. I was around a lot of the lamas all the time when they were practicing.
That's really
and
cool.
They were doing all the instruments, and that, because I would go up to the monastery and they'd have the daily Tara or the daily Mahakala, and you could just drop in and just listen.
Yeah.
And they all had those great voices, and they, it was just part of what they did, right? It was not a big deal. It was before they were recording them even. And just being around the sounds they made and the instruments really does move and change things in your body.
I mean, that especially
and it's so cool. And you don't even have to really understand it.
Yeah, you can feel it, because when you hear it, even like with music, like sometimes something, just the way it sounds, like it touches you and it affects you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I that's super cool. I wish I could have dropped in on
it's
stuff
one
like
of
that.
the things I went to probably one of the most amazing events I ever went to was the cremation of Trungpa Rinpoche in Vermont.
Okay.
And so they do a big deal with cremation with when a lama is cremated, and it was huge event in the town. I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of people. And they had all the high-powered lamas there, and they had the body in the center, and you circumambulated the body. And while you were doing that, they were all playing and chanting. And these are all like heavy-duty lamas. It was really amazing. And there were signs in the sky. There was a rainbow around the cloud. And they were. I was not on any drugs. I
like to clarify, I was sober seeing these things.
And I took pictures of it, But that sound, and also, when people talk about like, the Hebrew letters and Kabbalah and all those ancient languages, they do have a lot of power.
Yeah. Well, I think there's also something really cool that when you're speaking or even saying words in this language, like it kind of connects you through time. Because even if it's a dead language, like just vocalizing it is kind of like a remembrance, like this came from real people that existed, and you're kind of connected in that way. And I think that's pretty powerful too. So
that's a really good point, because one of the things I noticed when I started studying the lineage of the tarot, so I got interested just in the history of the tarot because, I'm just a curious person. Yeah. And more books are coming out. But when I first started studying, there weren't a lot of legitimate books about the history.
Yeah.
But then once you start realizing and then reading from the history. So then I started reading things by Dion Fortune or by Waite. And once you start tapping in, what I realized was indirectly I was being influenced by them. Like they're living teachers still.
Yeah.
And that's true, I think, of all magical traditions, is that you can tap into that stream. And I did it kind of accidentally. I was just kind of curious. And so you're right, with the language, it's the same idea.
Yeah, it holds something that kind of transcends time, and especially like when you're reading into the history and you're kind of, for a moment, you're kind of, the past and the present kind of bleed together a little bit, because when you're reading in it, you're not really here, you're there, and you're reading someone's words. Someone put that down, so
yeah, it is. As I've gotten older, I appreciate it more. I think, wow, that person was sitting there, and I try to imagine them sitting there.
Yeah, I love getting into the visuals of it. Like, if they're sitting there and they're writing it. Now I'm holding this book, a copy of their words. There's a really cool like expression. I'm assuming it's Latin, and if I say it wrong, forgive me. But it's like verba volent scripta manet, which is words fly, but the written word stays.
Ah,
Yeah.
that
So
is really
I
cool.
think about that too whenever I'm writing, like, because the act of writing as well, putting those words down, like the words of power, like it confers something. And I might not be able to explain what, but it's like, I feel like there's something here.
Well, and it's a good point, the act of writing itself. And also, one of the things about the act of writing is it's very physical.
Yeah.
You don't think of writing as physical, but it really is.
Yeah.
Even, I mean, maybe it's a little more physical when you use a pen.
Yeah.
At least for me, because I'm one of these people, I grew up with typewriters.
Oh, no. I had a typewriter when I was little.
Typewriter, then word processing. Finally, I got a laptop late actually for a writer. And so I still use a lot of like pen, but a lot of writers will do that for certain things they write because of that connection to the body.
The physical act is very impacting. And there is something different when you actually put a pen to paper. Like, I mean, a lot of the work that I do now is very digital. Like it's just faster to like write on the computer. It's faster to do the artwork that I do because I do digital painting, but I have a tablet and I'm still like painting, but it is always different to feeling a physical thing push into the paper and putting like actual pigment onto a canvas is a very different experience. There's nothing that quite replicates it.
Right.
And I know for like for learning as well, like it's actually very beneficial to physically write because it helps you like record the information a lot better than just typing out notes or listening to something. That physical act.
They have done studies with that, and I realized I used to think that I should stop doing that because I'm a note taker.
But it's
and
good.
Then they said it was good. I said, thank God, I'm not just wasting my time.
Yeah, well, I think about all those notebooks that I would write things down, and it feels like it. I can still remember stuff that I wrote down, like in these stacks of notebooks that are like decades old now. Because I'm 36, so like I wrote some of these things when I was like 10 or 11, and I can remember all of that stuff. But it like sometimes the stuff that's just kind of like in this digital, it just kind of gone.
Yeah,
because it's not truly written. Yeah. When you write something on a page, you can't just erase it.
Right. Well, that is true. There is more of a permanent feeling to it. There's something, but there's something that energy-wise. One of the things I kept all my letters because nice. When you were younger, that's what we did.
Yeah, me too. And I still write letters to my friends.
Well, you're a blessing because nobody will write me a letter. I did get someone to send me a postcard.
I'll write you a letter.
I
would be my pleasure to write you a letter.
I would love that. I love letter writing. I kept them.
Me too. I even have like the wax seal stamps. I like to make them all pretty and like I don't know because I know what it feels like to actually open a piece of mail that isn't just some junk.
Yes.
Like to open a letter from someone, like that's a very special feeling. So because I know how I feel, I like to give that to my friends. And my friends will tell me like they still have my letters from like 10, 15 years ago because it's special. And
it is totally special. And I love that I had artist friends that they would put drawings in them.
Oh, yeah.
And one was really good artist, so I kept hers. I mean, I kept them all anyway. And
I have stacks of letters that like my grandma would send me,
right.
and like friends. Like I have boxes that are just filled with them. And like sometimes when you go back and read it, again, that's that transporting in time for that moment when you're sitting there and reading it. You're back in a moment that's kind of outside of the now.
Well, I came across some letters. I don't have mine organized very well. I didn't even remember this friend of mine. He was I had a crush on him, but we never actually went out or anything. But I really cared a lot about him. And I found out only like 15 years ago, he died really young, really suddenly in his 30s. Or he was a super, super smart. And he was in chemistry and he was a celloist. Man. And I found these letters we had written only recently, and it was just about school. And it was so nice to have them. I thought, oh my God, it just was like him in the letter. He was very conscientious student. And
you can see it like in the handwriting. I find the handwriting fascinating too. And that's something I'm kind of proud of in my book. I like, there's some handwritten notes from the characters, and I made sure that each of the handwriting, it matches the character. It's very hard to change your handwriting, by the way. I actually looked at my old letters and I would study the handwriting from like my male friends, because men and women also write differently too. And like,
interesting.
Yeah, so I would study the letters and I would study the handwriting and to kind of craft the handwriting for the specific characters, because there's a few little handwritten notes in there.
Oh, that's wonderful.
In doing that, I kind of started to learn about handwriting too, because it tells you about your psychology, and like there's some interesting stuff in there too. So
that's the whole graphology. Is it
I don't know what the
study
term
of
for it is, but
handwriting.
And it's specifically for your cursive handwriting.
Yes.
But yeah, so I ended up learning stuff about that too. But I find just looking at handwriting is fascinating because it tells you a little bit of the person. Like
Absolutely.
it reveals something. So
Yeah, I think cursive writing is going out of style.
well, I'm gonna write you. I know it is, but I'll write you a cursive letter
Oh,
because
I'm
I
so
write
excited.
in cursive. I have my print, which has so that I can actually like read my notes. But
Right.
then I have my loopy cursive writing. So yeah,
It sounds like you put a lot of detail and thought into the
Everything.
world and the character.
everything.
No, I was really interested that you'd even think about the handwriting of the character.
I don't know. I look, I'm not diagnosed with anything, but I wouldn't be surprised if I got like ADHD or like OCD or stuff like that. But like, cause I get very much into the detail. I love like just, for me, when I started making Eclipse, it was what is the word I'm trying to look for, but I made it because the environment that I was in was very harmful. So I had to create a place inside my head that was safe. And so it started as like the security, that I would, make. But in order for it to be safe, I had to really feel like it was real. So I crafted it into like this painful level of detail so that, when I'm in my bad environment and I just kind of like go in my, maladaptive daydreaming, it was so real that it could capture me and I could at least block out the bad. But in doing that, I created this world that's just like every little detail I would think about. Like if I was imagining a scene with a character eating a meal, I'm like, well, what are they eating? How did they season it? Well, what are they wearing? Where did the material come from? Like I couldn't just have this scene. I had to know where everything was. Is it a stone table? Is it a brick table? Is it wood? Is it like, and building all these little details ended up making the world so much more fleshed out.
Right.
So
Well, I know when you do a television show, you have to always create the backstory of all the characters, even if you never use them.
I've always find that fascinating too. Oh, and in video games as well.
Ah,
Because one of my favorite games was Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, and I remember just looking around because it's basically a digital set. Because everything that's placed there, like when you're in Link's little house and like there's pictures and stuff, it's like someone had to put that there. It's like it's set dressing. I find that fascinating too, because that's little storytelling elements that maybe on camera or even in the game you're only going to see for a few seconds, but someone had to think about it and physically place it there with intention. Yeah.
Now, going back to your character, the main character is a male character,
Yeah.
right? What is his name again?
Jero Alice.
Gerald. And so it's interesting you would choose a male character.
Yeah.
Well, not really, but it does, I don't know why it does. It still is kind of a question. Why would a man choose a woman and I feel people can do a good job of it, but why were you drawn to a male character?
I'm sure that's something in my psychology that maybe that felt safer. I mean, this kind of delves into a little bit of a darker backstory for myself, but my mother was very abusive. So I was a lot more comfortable and safer around my granddad and my dad. So I think the male in my family represented safety, and the women were, the woman represented like instability and danger. So I think in my early writing, I was probably still kind of drawn to that, where like the male character at least felt more safe and stable, even though his character, he messes up a lot. He's 23. He doesn't know what he wants in life. He he feels already lost and like kind of burnt out. Like he gets emotional. He gets angry. He's a young man, and he screws up and he gets frustrated with himself or like not knowing things. So he still has like not like what we would consider like stoic male qualities. Like he's a man, but he's a young man. So he's kind of an emotional man. But I do think probably that what I was drawn to was that kind of like early psychology, because this next book series that I have is predominantly female lead characters.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, Etcher is female and she's like the counterpart. I mean, she's on the cover too. But I'm sure that has some deeper roots in psychology, that the male character just felt like a safer choice. But as I've grown as a woman and like, kind of cultivated what I feel like a woman should be, now I feel more comfortable having female characters.
Right.
We have a question from our chat.
Oh,
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw this into both of you, and they want to know if you have a favorite sci-fi writer, and I'm going to maybe expand that even to fictions or fantasy. So who is your favorite author and influence?
Well, my all-time favorite book is Tolkien's Hobbit. I don't know if that's like a basic answer, but I love The Hobbit. As for sci-fi, I love Asimov. I think is that early sci-fi stuff is brilliant. I love it. Mm-hmm. Those would be mine.
Well, I read more when I was younger, other than, of course, Tolkien. We grew up, my parents read us Tolkien. And I didn't understand. I was the youngest. I didn't understand it very well. But we made up. My brother Eric, he made up little like villages based on Tolkien, little tiny things, and we
Yeah.
would play act the world of The Hobbit. So I think that one. But I really liked Anne McCaffrey when I was younger,
Oh,
and
very
Ursula
nice.
Le Guin. I really liked her.
nice.
But I've gone back. Other than I'd still like Ursula Le Guin. But I've noticed that I don't seem to have the same connection to my early fantasy people than except for Tolkien.
Yeah, Tolkien's timeless, man.
Yeah, I know.
But I mean, like my love for The Hobbit is that I read it to my daughter every night for years. So like we've gone through that book cover to cover, and like that one's gonna have like a special place in my heart. Like even now when I sit down and read it, in a hole in the ground there was a hobbit. like oh, I love it. But yeah, for like sci-fi stuff, I still love Asimov. I really like the older sci-fi stuff.
Okay.
When they didn't know like what space was going to look like, and
Right.
because it's so interesting to see how they envision the future.
Interesting.
yeah.
So do you think maybe it's a little more? I don't know. Are people more pressured to be more realistic now with their?
Possibly.
Whereas when we didn't know anything, you could imagine anything you want to get away with it.
That's what I kind of feel like. Yeah, you could suspend your disbelief a little bit more because as sci-fi starts to become reality, it's like, well, that's not going to work. And it's
Right.
like, well, and I kind of think of that with my science fiction, because the next series is science fiction. Like this one's heavy fantasy,
Right.
but my next book is a high like sci-fi, and I try and make it real, but it still kind of traipses into the realms of fantasy just because it's a little more fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it's nice to have that, but I think you kind of hit it on the head. Is like, yeah, when back in the day they didn't know what to expect, so anything could have been, and it's very creative. But now it's like, well, you can't do that because space is this and this, and like, well, that wouldn't work because we know that black holes don't do da da da. I was like, well, killjoy.
And I think they're wrong. I think that one of the things I got really interested in is as a both in magic and as a writer is the concept of imagination.
Yeah.
And how when people say, "Oh, it's just your imagination," I said, "Well, wait a minute. Everything is imagination."
All of this has been built from imagination. Like we only agree that this is real because we all agree on it. Like, but all of this
Exactly.
stuff is made up.
I still think imagination, even if you make mistakes, should trump everything because it's without imagination, we wouldn't be in this position. We wouldn't have imagined these cell phones. And they were imagined. They were initially imagined.
Imagination is kind of like that key to innovation.
Yes.
Like you have to take it now from imagination and bring it into the real, but the spark of that creativity, it has to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
And then you can make it. But if you have no imagination, what are you gonna do?
Exactly.
Like the creative thinking is what gets you there. Like I think there was like a quote from Einstein, but just how like logic gets you from point A to B, but like the imagination is like the journey in between, like that gets you to all those different places. I'm butchering this, but yeah, like imagination is kind of a pivotal piece of innovation and like forward thinking and like progression. So yeah, imagination.
And that's part of what I like about the magical mind. So going back to the idea of magic in this realm, this materialistic realm versus the fantasy, even though it can be more subtle, it can also really surprise you.
Yeah.
The little, what I call sort of the daily magics that happen, or the interaction. I always get really a kick out of the interaction of either the animals with you, or we have this whole weird, I'm calling it, I've termed this penny magic. I have this whole thing with money now and pennies that I never had anywhere else. I've always found pennies.
Yeah.
I've always thought it was good luck. But here we went to this whole nother level with money, finding it in places you should never find it, sometimes in little configurations. It's been going on at least a year now.
Huh.
And I'm going to write about it at some point, and I think it's part of Bakersfield magic. It's a
might
very
be something
earthy
here.
magic. Coins are earthy, and so-
yeah, there's a lot of history in that too. Like because the whole thing of like if it's a heads up penny and it's lucky, and like there's so much culture already around that's been around for so long. Just to like find a penny is kind of a lucky thing.
Yeah.
And then but yeah, sometimes you find stuff in weird places. Like that's a very auspicious place for that coin to be there. Like,
But
yeah.
there's this tie-in to me with the magical mind and imagination, because there's more freedom in practicing magic than, say, even though I'm very much like Carl Jung. I feel there's unfortunately there's still a limitation, which he even recognized, since he practiced alchemy and he had to hide it.
Oh yeah, I bet. Yeah, because that
Yeah,
would have like yeah.
you know, so he actually did have a place he practiced it. So, you know, there's this thing with imagination that you're allowed to do if you practice magic. You get to imagine things visually. You get to, you know, kind of pick and choose who are your gods or goddesses.
Yeah.
And that seems to be, it opens you up, just like writing does, to new experiences.
Yeah, I think like there is a Terry Pratchett quote that those that don't believe in magic won't find it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that, because it's like, yeah, you know, because you have the people that are like, oh, none of that stuff is real, and it's like, God, what a miserable existence you must lead. Like,
and it is real, and there's even things that we call magic that someday probably are just connected physics.
Sure, yeah,
We just don't understand it yet.
I mean, you go far enough in physics and that stuff starts sounding like it's totally out there. But like, I think, yeah, magic is important. Like it's an invigoration in your life. And I you know, as long as you're not trying to like harm or swindle people, like I think you should enjoy it. You should practice it, because it does open you up to more. If you're willing to at least hold that door open. Kind of like with, you know, Fox Mulder from, you know, I want to believe.
I want to believe.
I want to believe. You know, I still want the truth and I still want to know what's out there, but I want to believe. I want to leave that doorway open for whatever might be possible, as opposed to like slamming it shut and be like, no, I know reality. I know what everything is. It's like, all right, enjoy that, I guess.
It's a miserable life.
Yeah, like I like having magic and whimsy in my life. You do you.
Well, and that's a good way to call it, magic and whimsy, and it's a delightful thing, and it does make life more colorful. And
yeah, it's like I'm not trying to like delude myself. Like I'm still, you know, I'm still trying to be reasonable and like down to earth, because sometimes you meet people that are so away with the fairies, you're like, I can't engage in this conversation any longer. You enjoy that? I'ma go. But like, I think you can have a balance of like being logical, being reasonable, being, you know, like having things, you know, set out, but also allowing for there to be a little bit of magic and whimsy, allowing for there to be a little bit more. Like, you know, you can have one foot on the ground and you head in the clouds, and as long as you're walking that path, I think it's okay.
see, I definitely have two sides of myself. I have the side of me that's more that I'm grounded and in reality, and then I have this other side of me that thinks we can do a lot more than we
I think so
think we
too.
can do.
Yeah,
but
I think it's
don't
like a
know how
fine
to
line.
proceed with it. Like, other than I study synchronicities,
Yeah.
and I try to find people that have done something a little unusual with magic, that they've had some sort of success that other people don't. And they're kind of out of the way people, I think. They're a little harder to find, someone that has used magic in a way that isn't necessarily about success or, prosperity, which, by the way, I don't have anything against, because I do it. But, you know, finding other ways that magic helps people that we don't think about it helping.
Yeah. And I like to look at things like, how is this helpful? How is this useful? Because I think sometimes that's where there's a disconnect, where, you know, sometimes people, when they're very, very out there, they go on and on, like they kind of start cannibalizing their own ideas because they're really getting away with it. But they never ask, okay, so, and what? Like, how is this helpful? Like, yeah, maybe all of that stuff that you're talking about is real. Does that help me right now?
Yeah.
No? Okay, well, then maybe shelf that for a little bit and let's move forward with what's happening right now. Like, that's the balance I like to cultivate. Because I think, too, that there's probably a lot more that we are capable of, but it's hard to figure out, like, well, but how do I tap into that? How do I utilize that? How, like, is this reality so stringent with its, like, it's, you know, how it's set up, that can that thing even exist here? Or to tap into that, can I still even be in this reality?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So.
No, it's really good. We have another question, I think.
Yeah, we're starting to get close to time as well.
What is your favorite fantastic creature or animal? Do you have a favorite one, since you actually paint
I
them?
love dragons. I love dragons. I love like chimeras and like all the like fantasy beasts, like the creatures from like ancient civilizations that they used to like guard temples and stuff like that.
Sphinx for me.
Yeah, sphinxes are cool. But yeah, like I'm sorry if my answer seems so big, but I love dragons.
Well, I could totally understand that. Dragons are super cool.
And like the different regions as well, like because you got the Western dragons and you got the Asian dragons, and like they're even different from like Japanese and Chinese. But yeah, that is my favorite.
I mean, you kind of wonder if there was a dinosaur that maybe the dragon is based on.
I'm sure it's possible. I mean, when I've read about like ancient Egypt and stuff like that, like they would find fossils and like marine fossils because they didn't know about Pangea. They didn't know like the oceans receded. So they would like create creatures to explain the fossils because they didn't know about evolution. So I'm sure that maybe they saw something like a pterodactyl or something like that. I don't want to discredit that dragons might have been real because that would be super cool. Dragons and unicorns, I'd be down for that. But it's very possible that they, people might have come across like fossils that they did not understand and then created like, oh, this must have been this great fire-breathing beast that, yeah.
I do remember reading in some sort of magical history book, or I forget who it was. They were talking about a long time ago when magic was part of the culture. It was not a separate thing for anyone.
Yeah.
That it is possible that they could see things that were not necessarily physical, that it was just part of their life. And I've always wondered, why do so many deities from the past have so many arms? What was the basis of that? I mean, there has to be something that happened, because I don't think there was necessarily a literal thing, but isn't it kind of peculiar?
I mean, isn't there a thing in like Hinduism that like it's more of a representation, at least in the artistic depiction, that like, because the arms will be holding different things that represent stuff. And I don't know if it's necessarily like, that they saw a being with all those arms, but that it is an artistic choice. But it might not be. I don't know.
No, I understand that Tibetan Buddhism, everything is deeply symbolic, from the little tiny leaf in the. But it's just something I'm curious about, because it's such an unusual depiction. And
that
also
you don't
the different
see
colors, which I love, that they have gods and goddesses that are green and blue and
red, and
there's no racism then. It's like,
and the different colors have like a very different like meaning as well. Like color psychology is quite fascinating, because different countries associate things with color very differently than you would out in America or in England. So that's a whole other thing too. Like, and how did that influence like come up?
Yeah, like white is death in Chinese.
And then you look at like even like Chinese culture, you look at the colors that are very like, oh, okay, this looks very Chinese with like those color choices. Or like you go to somewhere in like Russia and then you see like, the very colorful buildings. It's like, okay, that's a whole different like bohemian looking thing. The psychology and the relationship between color and culture and countries is like how that varies and how that impacts you. It's like, it makes you think too, like, how did that come up? Why those colors? Why did those colors become important?
That's a really good point. We were talking about color too on a show recently too, and color therapy. And I remember when I was in, maybe it was the 90s. I don't know. It was the 90s that really color baths were really popular. You'd go and you'd buy the little package, and everybody was into it, at least in my area at East Coast. Get the green bath for this particular ailment. And then I was talking to someone about it, and it got me interested. Like you're saying, there's a lot of validity to color therapy.
Yeah, I mean, it does impact you. Like, I love going to like the Korean spa, and like sometimes they'll have like the color rooms where like they just like do these different like lights, and it's very relaxing. Just be there, and sometimes it's red, and I go into green, and then blue, and you're like, oh, I love this. I
didn't know they did that in the Korean spas.
Not all of them, but there are some that will have like a little light room. So like you can go and do your spa stuff, and then you can go and like chill in the light room, and then and get snacks, and what a great like experience.
I want to do that. That's
Heck yeah.
I've never really gone.
I wish there was a Korean spa in Bakersfield. I've come to appreciate Bakersfield, but there's more that I wish we had, and a proper Korean spa here would be fantastic. That and Elise sandwiches. Oh my God, please. I miss my oh God, my banh mi.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely so they don't have any. They don't have any Tai Chi classes that I can find. There's one place that, I mean, there were so many in LA.
I know
that I was kind of surprised, because they'd have a lot of martial arts here.
Yeah, they do have martial arts.
And they have a
here.
really good fencing place if I wanted to fence again.
Oh, really?
So, which I don't know if I could even do it at this point. Because it's arduous. But anyway, kind of getting back to the show a little bit more. I don't know if there's anything more to talk about with the whole magic and imagination. I think that Oh, I did want to mention something. You were talking about, doing good with magic. Well, we had Gary Lockman on the show last June, and he wrote a book about politics and magic. And he did kind of a deep dive. He's a researcher. He's well known with writing in the occult on Donald Trump.
Oh.
And how he uses, and the people behind him, how they use magic. And one of the things I didn't know about Donald Trump is he admires Norman Vincent Peale, who believes in positive thinking. Positive thinking doesn't mean you're positive. It just means you just think, I'm going to get this no matter what.
Yeah, the visualizing the intention, or visualizing that you already have the thing.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's powerful.
One of the issues going on in this American culture that I see is there's a lot of magical things being thrown at people through social media. And if you don't know what magic is, you can be manipulated.
Oh, yeah.
And there is a dark side
Yeah.
that has been used throughout history, magical principles. The virus thought as virus, it's the same thing, but now they're using memes, right? And so I think it's important that people understand when they're being manipulated by magical things in their life, even if it's not a magical person per se.
Yeah, because like if you don't really understand what you're consuming, you don't know how it's affecting you. And it's the same with like social media and all of that sort of stuff too. Yeah, and it is unfortunate that there's a lot of people out there that have no good intentions, and they will exploit you and take advantage of you. And you got a lot of people that just a lot of times they'll turn to like magic just because they want help with something, and it can be a comfort, but if you turn to the wrong person and they're really just good at reading people, and they're like, got a sucker, they'll use you up, and that sucks, because I think magic can be a very positive thing, but everything kind of has that counterbalance. And
absolutely. And so just kind of knowing the intention of the person or persons involved, but also knowing principles of magic can help people.
Even some well-intentioned people can still do you harm. Like you really have to guard yourself. You have to understand what's going on, and sometimes the best way is to not consume any of that. Try to get off social media a little bit, which can be very hard to do. Even a well-intentioned person can end up harming you just because they don't understand what they're doing.
Absolutely. Now we're getting close to the end. I did want to give a shout out to your books again, and you can find them on your website. Yeah,
ChaunceyFelisz.com. I'm also on Instagram as Voodoo Epi. It's VOODOOEPII. But you can also go on Amazon and just Everdoor Chauncy books, and they should come up.
And we always put a link to, at least one link to our...
You can just put my website.
Our guest will put her website on the show link, and that way people can get to it really easily. We try to keep up with that. Once in a while we forget. But
I appreciate it.
So is there any sort of last thought you wanted to sort of share, something on your mind about anything we've been talking about today?
Just read more. Just read more. I would like it for everyone to be reading my books, but just read more, please. That's my final thoughts on that.
That's a really great thing to remind people, because I know in some ways reading is down, and it's so satisfying.
No, it's good. It doesn't even have to be fantasy stuff. Just read something. Get a physical book. I mean, an ebook, fine, but get an actual book that's been published. Like, just read more, please, people, please.
Well, I agree with at least doing some physical books, because there's something about the physical book.
I love the cracking it open. Yeah. I'm all for the physical books, but I'm not going to knock you if you want your Kindle and all that stuff. But get some real books.
Yeah. Oh, the ink, everything about them.
I know,
the design.
it's the texture. Oh God, I love
good
books.
Well, thank you for coming on the show.
Hey,
that was really a very lively conversation.
Yeah, this was fun. Thank all of you as well.
and I can't wait to see what you're going to write next too. Well, we'll talk about that maybe another show.
Oh, yeah. Oof, man.
And thank you all for tuning in. Join us next time as we continue to explore the esoteric and the obscure together. Have a great week.